For many years, fans believed they had seen every part of Joe Martin's amazing shop. But deep inside the building, behind a locked door that no camera crew ever went into, workers found something they didn't expect. What they discovered wasn't just metal and engines, it was the secret story of Joe's past, and the mystery he never planned to tell anyone. Before there was TV, being famous, or episodes with millions of views, there was just Joe Martin, a quiet builder in a Texas garage, turning rusty old metal into beautiful things, with nothing but his hands, his tools, and his patience. Long before Iron Resurrection made him known everywhere, Joe was already a hero among builders. Not because he was flashy, not because he was famous, but because he focused on his work. Every curve he welded, every line he shaped, had the spirit of someone who knew that machines weren't just pieces of metal. They were stories that needed to be told again. Fans called him the mechanic's mechanic, the kind of builder who didn't just fix cars, he gave them back their pride. While other TV shows tried to create drama, Joe worked on the details. The camera didn't catch him talking much, but when it did, his voice was calm, steady, and careful, like a person who had found meaning in the quiet moments between sparks flying. At Martin Brothers Customs, hidden deep in the heart of Texas hill country, Joe built more than motorcycles and hot rods. He built trust. His brother Jason took care of the metalwork. His wife Amanda kept the business running smoothly. And together they made something that felt more like a family than just a TV show. But even a master can hide secrets inside his greatest work. Behind every shiny car frame and TV build, there were rumors of projects he never finished, early designs that got lost, and one door inside the shop that no camera had ever filmed. Joe never talked about it. When people asked, he would smile and talk about something else, saying only, "Some things aren't meant for TV." It was something he said that made fans both curious and uneasy, because they knew that every legend keeps one secret, the one project that shows who the person really is. For many years, Iron Resurrection showed us what Joe Martin made. But behind that locked door, hidden in the dark corners of his own shop, was what he had left unfinished. And when the day finally came that the door was opened, the truth about Joe's past would surprise everyone, even Joe himself. For years, whispers went around Martin Brothers Customs like smoke from a welding tool. Loyal fans who had visited the shop promised there was a part of the building they weren't allowed to go near. A corner blocked off by old toolboxes and many years of dust. It wasn't shown on any tour, never talked about on Iron Resurrection, and even workers who had been there a long time didn't like talking about it. They would just shrug their shoulders and say, "That's Joe's space." The rumors started on the internet in fan groups and Facebook pages about the show. Some people said it was where Joe kept the first custom bikes he ever built, early designs from his biker build-off days. Other people swore it was a secret room full of failed tries, machines that weren't good enough. A few even guessed it held something personal, a build connected to something sad, or an idea too emotional to finish. When fans asked Joe directly during live question and answer sessions, he would smile that calm smile you couldn't read and say, "There's nothing back there worth looking at." But to the people who knew him well, that answer only made them more curious. Joe Martin wasn't the kind of person to hide junk. If something was locked up, there was a good reason. Over the years, new walls were put up, equipment got moved, and that corner slowly disappeared from view, like a ghost space inside a living, working shop. Workers joked that it was the shop's mystery triangle. Other people said that when the grinding tools stopped at night, you could hear the quiet echo of something unfinished, a project that had never left the floor. It became part of the Iron Resurrection story, the locked room, the chapter no one saw in Joe's life. And while most people thought it was just made-up stories, the people who had worked next to Joe the longest knew better. Something was there, something left alone. Not by mistake, but because Joe chose to leave it that way. It happened almost like an accident. During a recent makeover of Martin Brothers Customs, the crew decided to make the main floor bigger. They were tearing down a wall that hadn't been moved in more than 10 years. But when one of the younger welders started clearing out an old set of cabinets, his hammer hit something unexpected. Metal that was thick and hollow. Behind the storage boxes was a thin line that had been welded shut. At first they thought it was just part of the original building, but when the shop boss brought Joe over to look at it, his reaction said everything. He froze, his eyes got narrow, like he was seeing something that should have stayed hidden. The crew waited to see what he wanted them to do. Joe didn't say anything, just turned around, walked away, and told them to leave it alone for now. But being curious has a way of getting louder when you ignore it. Later that same week, while Joe was out filming the show, the team decided to check it out. Sparks flew as the grinding tool cut through the old welds, letting out a smell of old metal and dust that hadn't been touched in years. When the final line gave way, the door made a creaking sound as it opened, and what was beyond it made everyone stop and stare. The air inside was stale, heavy with oil and silence. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, still connected with wires, but it was dead and didn't work. On the floor, footprints in the dust went nowhere. The room was smaller than they thought it would be, maybe 20 feet across, but packed from wall to wall with mysterious shapes under covers, tools still arranged on a workbench, and a half-empty bottle of motor oil sitting beside a rusty stool. It looked like someone had walked out in the middle of a project and never came back. When Joe returned and saw the door was open, he didn't yell or get mad. He just stood there quietly, staring into the darkness. "I guess you found it," he said softly. The first step into the locked room was like stepping back in time. The light from the shop barely reached past the doorway, cutting through many years of dust. Each shape under the covers looked like a ghost, the kind of feeling that only unfinished work can have. The crew didn't want to touch anything, scared to disturb what felt special and important. One by one, they pulled the covers back. The first one showed an old motorcycle frame, half-painted, with a design unlike anything Joe had ever shown to the public. The second thing was an engine, carved by hand, polished but not complete. On the workbench were blueprints, drawings and photographs, covered in dust thick enough to hide the writing. When they blew it off, the date at the top said 2004. Among the mess were personal things. A worn-out pair of gloves, a radio still set to a classic rock station, and a faded shopcloth folded neatly beside an envelope that had never been opened. Everything in the room screamed history and memories. It wasn't messy or random. It was like someone hit a pause button and never pressed play again. "Look at this," one of the crew whispered, picking up a yellowed folder with a label that said, "Project Resurrection." The pages inside were filled with hand-drawn ideas for motorcycles and hot rods that had never been shown on TV. Builds Joe had designed for himself, not for the show. What surprised them most was how careful and planned everything seemed. Nothing was thrown away or given up on. It was saved and protected. It was like Joe had locked away the truest version of his craft, untouched by cameras, contracts, or being famous. When he finally stepped inside, Joe didn't look angry. He just smiled a little, his hand touching the wall like he was greeting an old friend. "I haven't seen this in a long time," he said quietly. "Some of this stuff I had almost forgotten about." No one had the courage to ask why the door had been locked shut, but as Joe stood there in the silence of his own past, everyone could feel it. This wasn't just a workshop. It was a memory that had been welded shut and hidden away. Under the first cover was a shape every long-time fan knew right away. A motorcycle frame with the style that Martin Brothers was known for. The design was beautiful, raw, and powerful, like it had been built with both skill and feeling. One of the welders took a quick breath. "That's the bike," he whispered. It was a half-finished build from Joe's early biker build-off days, a project that disappeared after filming ended, leaving fans wondering if it had been sold, thrown away, or stolen. For almost 20 years, nobody knew where it was, and here it was, kept perfectly, like Joe had just stepped out for lunch 20 years ago. Next to it were 2 concept drawings taped to a board. The paper had turned yellow with age, but the title at the top could still be seen, Project Resurrection. Below it, pencil drawings of a sleek, futuristic motorcycle blended art with engineering. The kind of design that could have changed Joe's entire reputation if it had ever been finished. On the workbench were smaller treasures, custom gas tanks carved with early Martin Brothers customs letters, experimental parts that never got made for sale, and a set of hand-tooled leather seats still showing Joe's initials. The quality of the work was as perfect as the day it was made. To people who didn't know about building, this was just a forgotten storage space. But to anyone who had ever held a wrench, it was a time machine, a moment when a young builder was chasing perfection before TV, before being famous, before all the pressure. These weren't just early designs, they were dreams that got paused when life became too loud and busy. As Joe quietly ran his fingers along the lines of the old frame, the look on his face said everything. Some builds are left unfinished, not because you fail at them, but because they're pieces of you that the world isn't ready to see yet. Stacked beside the metal and machinery were boxes, old, worn out, and heavy with memories. Inside were photo books, papers from car shows that happened long ago, and handwritten notes from Joe's wife, Amanda. Each page felt like peeling back another layer of who he used to be before the cameras showed up. In one notebook, faded blue ink spelled out a message. Remember why you started, not what it's worth. Amanda had written it during the first season of Iron Resurrection, when the spotlight was new and too much to handle. Another letter folded neatly beside it said, "No matter how big it gets, promise me you won't lose what makes you real." There were photos too, some that fans had never seen before. Joe and Amanda at small Texas swap meets, long before TV producers came around. Jason Martin, covered in grease, laughing next to a half-built hot rod, and even a few early pictures of their crew, the same people who became like family on the show. The most touching thing they found, though, wasn't a photograph. It was a small silver keychain with the initials JM plus AM carved into it. The metal was worn smooth, clearly carried in a pocket for many years. It was simple, but in that room full of machinery and steel, it stood out as the most human thing there. When Amanda walked into the room later, she stopped completely still. Her eyes filled with tears as she saw those letters, the papers, and the old love notes. "He used to say this room was just storage," she whispered. "But it's not. It's us." In that moment, everyone realized this wasn't a secret workshop. It was Joe Martin's memory box, the one place he had kept untouched, keeping safe the people and passion that built his world. Among the boxes was something small but heavy, a leather-covered notebook worn from years of being used. Its pages were covered in pencil sketches, budget notes, and thoughts written in Joe's familiar, blocky handwriting. It was a shop journal, a mix of design blueprints and personal confessions. The first pages talked about builds from his early career, complete with sketches of fenders, frames, and paint patterns. But as the pages turned, the entries changed their mood. The handwriting got tighter, the thoughts more personal. "TV changed everything," one note said. "Deadlines killed creativity. Builds used to be art, now they're just episodes." Another one written in faded ink said, "I don't build for cameras, I build for peace. Somewhere along the way I lost that." He wrote about being exhausted, about missing time with Amanda, about the pressure to live up to a reputation that felt heavier with every season. "They call it Iron Resurrection," one entry said, "but sometimes I wonder what's left to resurrect in me." In the margins were sketches of a motorcycle unlike any other. Simple, refined, almost spiritual. It had no logo, no branding, just a single note underneath. "The Last Build." That name echoed through the room like a whisper. The Last Build wasn't just a machine, it was a statement, a project meant to bring Joe back to himself. And when the crew turned to look at him, he was already standing near the far corner, staring at a frame covered in dust. He smiled, but it was bittersweet and sad. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I remember that one." And with that, everyone in the room knew this discovery wasn't just about metal or memories. It was about the man behind it all, and the part of him he had left sealed away. In the farthest corner of the locked room, hidden under a cover that hadn't been touched in nearly 15 years, sat something different. The air felt heavier there, as if the dust itself knew it was guarding a secret.